Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we have going on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the absolutely just mind-boggling survival story of a woman named Young On. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. They are all BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. All right, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can get into this video. Now, this is a video that's actually on a case that's recent. It's crazy, right? I know, I never do recent cases, but this just happened in October of 2022. And for whatever reason, this one just grabbed me, man. I know I usually I wait for the whole case to come out and get all the information, but this case, as soon as it was suggested to me, because it was suggested to me by a subscriber, and I started reading about it, I read everything there was out there about it. They even released some court documents, so I read so many things. Now, as I said, this is a case that was suggested to me. It was suggested to me by a subscriber, but on Twitter, and their Twitter handle was Hey, It's Me, so hi, hey, it's me, thank you, hey, it's me. And this is a case that is actually local to Hey, It's Me. Okay. Saying that over and over is gonna get old. Young On survived what can only be described as an actual nightmare when her own husband abducted her, attempted to kill her, and then left her for dead. And that already sounds so just fucked up, but the details of what he did to her and what she went through are just like honestly unimaginable. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So I'm going to tell you the whole story, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a full face of makeup, hence the makeup in Morbid makeup. Now, if that's not really your thing, that's cool. Thanks for hanging out this long. I hope you find a channel that presents this case in a way you prefer. But if you're on the fence, you're not sure how you feel, maybe stick around. I think you could be surprised by how much you like it and also me. And at the end of this video, what I customarily do is ask you a question of the day. So after I've given you all the information and all the details, I want you to answer the question of the day, and that is this. How does a person do to another person what was done to Young On? And better yet, how do you think she summoned the strength and courage to save her own life? And now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of Young On, a woman who survived an actual nightmare. Okay, where does one even begin with this story? Well, I guess, okay, let's start by going back just a little bit to the date of October 17th, 2022. So, just right around the corner from here. Behind, whatever. And it was at about 1 a.m. And I would normally say, like, let's jump in our handy dandy time machine, but it feels like it's basically just a whisper away. So, like, why am I saying the things that I say? That's really the question. Anyways, it is 1 a.m. and the scene that we're starting with takes place at a home that's on a rural area of land in Washington, okay? The people who live there, the occupant is sleeping because it's like 1 a.m., so they're in bed, snug as a bug in a rug. When they are awoken, suddenly they were awake to the sound of frantic pounding and screaming on their front door, like outside their house. And I can only imagine how unsettling that'd be. Like, what would be going through your mind at that exact moment? Anyways, they get up to investigate, to go and see what all of the hullabaloo is about. And this is when they find that outside of their home, there is a woman. She is completely freaking out. She's covered in dirt and duct tape, and she is begging for the people in the home to help her and to call the police. Now, this woman, it turns out, was a woman who was being searched for. Police and citizens in the area had been frantically looking for her since the day before, in the early afternoon, when police released a, bulletin, an alert that this woman was an endangered missing person who had been taken from her home against her will. And this woman was Young On. Now, let's go back a little bit so I can explain to you how we got here. How did we get here when I used to know you so well? Okay. On a gloomy Sunday, October 16th, 2022, police responded to a call, and they responded to a house on the 3800 block of Rossburg Street in Lacey, Washington. Lacey, Washington, which is about 60 miles southwest of Seattle, is a suburb in Olympia, Washington, with a population of around 50,000 people. It's located along Interstate 5, and Lacey is described as a safe, family-friendly neighborhood close to the region's, quote, natural beauty. And apparently the, quote, stable education system and business-friendly infrastructure, end quote, make it one of the best places that you can live in, like, the whole country. And man, it is beautiful there. I mean, the whole Pacific Northwest is honestly, like, so stunning. I love it there so much. And this is the backdrop of our horrible story today. So, police go to this home in Lacey, and they're going because they're responding to a call that come in where the dispatcher, like, answered the call, you know, like, ring, hello, 911. And all they could hear was the sounds of, like, a scuffle and a woman screaming. But the woman who was screaming sounded like she was gagged, like it was all muffled sounding. And whoever it was sounded absolutely terrified and was pressing random buttons, but not, like, saying something that was understandable, right? The dispatcher described it as constant screaming, banging, shuffling, the sound of a dog barking in the background before just total silence. So since the call, like, disconnected, it was traced, and it was traced by using the cell phone tower data from, like, 2 different cell phone towers, and the police responded to what they were calling a, quote, unknown trouble call, end quote. And they got to the home and they found that the garage door was open, but it didn't seem like anybody was home. Like, they would knock on the door and nobody would come to the door, and they're like, huh, that's weird, because that was a definite, like, real weird phone call. And while they're standing out front trying to figure out how to proceed, since, you know, nobody's answering the door, 2 kids, well, one's an adult and one's like a smaller kid, walk up to the home. So the 2 kids that walked up are 20 and 11, I believe. And their names are out there, but I'm not gonna mention them because, like, it hardly matters. And the situation that they're in and their family's in is already, like, fucked enough. So I'm just gonna leave them out of it. But they walk up and the cops are like, so hi, are your mom and dad home or anything like that? And the eldest of the 2, which was a daughter, I believe, was like, so they were. So what happened is me and my mom and my little brother here had all been at church, and we came home from church to find my dad's car in the driveway. And so my mom wanted to talk to him alone, so she went inside and I went inside. I grabbed my keys. I didn't see my dad, but I knew he was there, but, like, they were going to talk. So me and my brother left, and that was about 30 minutes ago. And when we left, they were still here. The police in response were like, okay, cool. Do you mind at all if we look around a little bit, because, like, we've knocked and nobody's answering, we got this call, blah blah blah. And so the kids are like, sure, yeah, go ahead, look in, do your thing. And it's a good thing the cops did this, because, like, they could have easily just left. I mean, right? Like, nobody's answering the door, doesn't seem like anything's going on anymore. And we hear so many times in these stories where cops go to do a welfare check and then just leave without confirming that somebody's okay. But in this case, something must have made them be on high alert, because they proceeded with looking through the house. So they go in and they clear the house, you know, room by room, and they find that nobody is inside the house. But when they're looking around, they're like, huh, this doesn't look very good, because they saw obvious signs of a disturbance in the home. The house appeared to have been ransacked, and in addition to that, a bunch of stuff was broken, like the cell phones were broken, other devices used for communication were broken, and they found, like, used duct tape in one of the rooms that had hair on it. And they were like, this looks not good, right? So we should probably do something about this, because I think we have a situation on our hands here, and not a good one. So upon investigation, like, looking into the house, looking into the occupants, police found, like, the police that were on the scene found that this house was not unknown to law enforcement. They had been to this house before, and this house was known as being a home that had some domestic violence issues. I guess they've been out there a couple of times because the couple was going through a divorce, and they were having, you know, arguments over property, arguments over money, things like that. And at some point in the recent in the recent past, the husband had been arrested for domestic violence issues. So they were like, okay, you know? So the couple in the home was 42-year-old Young An and her husband, 53-year-old Chae An. And real quick, I did see his name reported as two different things. So in a lot of the reporting, it says Chae An. And in one of the reportings, he was listed as Kyung An. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Actually, I don't care if I'm pronouncing his name correctly because he is an asshole. But anyways, I saw in another reporting that his name is Chae Kyung An, but I'm going to call him Chae throughout all this because that's how I've seen it reported mostly, and that's how it's reported like in the court documents I read. But in case you saw it as Kyung, same person. Okay, moving on. The two were married, but they were estranged at this point, and they were in the midst of a divorce. Divorce papers had been filed the summer before this happened, and Young had a protection order in place at some point recently against Chae for domestic violence, and it was a no contact order, but recently that had been like no longer in effect. So that's like the backstory with them. That fact, like the history of the couple, like the not so great history of the couple, accompanied with the fact that they got a frantic 911 call from the area, and the fact that nobody was there and there was like duct tape, like all of it is painting a picture that is not pretty. So the police put out an endangered missing persons alert, and this alert goes out to everybody. It goes out to all the cell phones of people in the area, kind of like an Amber Alert would, and it also gets blasted all over social media. Young An was listed as being 42 years old, standing at 5 foot 3 inches tall, 120 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Her husband, Chae, was described as 53 years old, standing at 5'8", 180 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes, though he is bald in all the photos they used. And in another, like on another poster that I saw, it described him as bald. So I guess his natural hair is black. Whatever. The police, the alert, told citizens to be on the lookout for a light blue 2006 Dodge Caravan with a Washington license plate, which is helpful. I mean, they are in Washington, so most plates are going to be Washington, but that was noted. And the couple was last said to have been seen at 12:54 p.m. and that Young had been taken by force, and that people were urged to be on the lookout, to call if they saw anything, but to not approach if they saw them. Detectives, patrol officers, and members of the Lacey Community Resource Unit, which is like a group that provides outreach and services to the most vulnerable of Lacey's community members, well, all of them canvassed the area. And in doing so, like in canvassing the area, police went door to door, and they asked all of the neighbors, like, hey, do you have any, first off, did you see anything, right? Duh, that's what they do. But they also asked if anybody had any surveillance video, because, you know, everybody's got a Ring door camera now. Like, everybody's got cameras everywhere. So they're like, listen, do you have any footage so we can see from around this time? Because we're looking for this woman, etc, etc. So this ends up being successful because at least one of the neighbors did have footage that gave police an idea of what had happened that day. In the footage, they saw Chae, which was Young's husband, pull into the driveway in his van. They saw him pull the van into the garage and close the garage door. And then they saw him leaving like a bat out of hell in that van right before police arrived. A neighbor said of seeing this footage, and I quote, "You don't want to speculate the worst, but she was in a very dire situation. And we were just praying for her. I think all of us were." Another neighbor said of the incident and police speaking to them and all that jazz, and I quote, "They came by, knocked on our door, and asked if we had any information because they saw we had the Ring cameras all around our house and just asked if we saw the blue Dodge they had. I think it sheds light on how domestic violence can be closer to home than you think, and behind closed doors, someone's life who seems pretty normal could be not as happy as you think." And I think that that's a really good takeaway in these sort of cases, is that you really have no idea what is going on in somebody's life. People show you what they want you to see. People have a lot of things that they keep to themselves for reasons A, B, and C. So this is just This is just me getting on like a weird high horse right now to just be nice to people because you don't know what they're going through. But now, that's it. That's moving on. So, apparently what had happened that day is young Aunt had had a totally normal morning with her kids. They had gotten up, they got ready, they went to church, they did the whole God thing, as people do on a Sunday morning if you go to church. And then they came home. And when they came home, young Aunt found her estranged husband inside her home, which since they're estranged, you would think like he doesn't live there, right? Right. He doesn't. At this point, he's no longer living in the home, but the eldest daughter lets police know that he would come over like once a week to do his laundry. That was not an unusual occurrence. It was at this point that Young asked her kids if they would leave. She wanted to talk to their father. She had intended to talk to Chae about their pending divorce and also like financial matters, which, you know, is not the type of thing you want to be talking about in front of your kids. So it's at this point that the kids leave so that they can have their conversation. They go, like she goes in, she gets her keys, she gets her, the older daughter, she goes and gets her keys, she leaves with her brother. They go to the Goodwill, they go to have some ice cream, they go to do anything but be there so that they can have their conversation. And as I'm sure you can imagine, because, you know, they're going through a divorce, things are rough, the conversation got heated. Because okay, there's already reports of domestic violence from this house, right? And they say that the most dangerous time for somebody who's in a relationship that is abusive is the time, right, when you are ending the abusive relationship. So things got heated. Chae got pissed, and Young was like, you know what? I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. Like, I'm gonna need you to go. This is ridiculous. So she asks him to leave, and then she goes into her upstairs bedroom to get changed. And Chae didn't take this well. He got super pissed off, and this is when he attacked young Aunt. He reportedly punched her repeatedly in the head before just taking her and throwing her on the ground. He then grabbed that duct tape that the police found when they got there, and he used it to bind her. He taped her arms behind her back. He taped up her thighs and her ankles, like her legs together, so she couldn't run. And then he took this duct tape to blindfold her. He literally put duct tape over her eyes. And I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that so much. I hate that so much. Now, fortunately for her, but unfortunately for Chae, young An was wearing an Apple Watch. And at some point, he left the room for a moment, and she was able to use this Apple Watch to call police, which is the call that got them to the house in the first place, and also to send out like an emergency notification to people who were in her like approved list in her phone. Like you can have a list of like emergency people in your phone, and she used this feature to send out an emergency message to those people in her phone. And of those people, this part made me so frustrated, of those people who got this distress message, one of them was her oldest daughter. So this freaking child had to get a message from her mother that something was going wrong with her at her house. And that just makes me so upset. Like, kids should not have to deal with stuff like that. I'm not mad at Young. I'm mad at her stupid loser dad who put her in this sort of situation. You know what I mean? It makes me so fucking mad. But her older daughter and also one of her friends who received the message as well, both reported receiving this emergency message at about 1 p.m. that day. Young's friend who received this emergency message told police that like they were concerned for Young because they knew that Young and Chae were going through a divorce, that it had been going really rocky, and that Young had informed this friend that at some point Chae had told her that he, quote, wasn't going down alone. Now, what's really upsetting here, among all the things that are upsetting here, because this is an upsetting case, is that Young later said, because remember, this is a survival story. Young survives this, thank God, that, in regards to this distress call, that when she called police, called 911, she could hear the dispatcher. She was sitting there and she could hear the dispatcher trying to speak to her, but couldn't do anything about it, because at this point she was already taped up and had tape like over her mouth and her eyes and her hands and all that. So that was what the police were hearing. That was the sound. I mean, I'm sure you could like deduce this based on like the story I'm telling, but that was what was happening. Is she was taped up. He was out of the room. She was duct taped, bound, gagged, all that bull. I don't think she was gagged, but you know what I mean. And she's calling police and she can like hear the dispatcher like, hello, 911. And she couldn't say anything. And I just imagine what that terror would be like. You know what I mean? Like what that would feel like to know that they're that close, but you can't say anything. She probably thought that they weren't going to find her, you know? It's just, ugh. And I mean, they don't find her, spoiler alert. I mean, they do. We'll get there. Anyways, so Chae, no. Anyway, so Young is there in the room trying to call 911, can't respond. And this is when Chae comes back into the room. He grabs her, she's all tied up, not tied up, but duct taped up, and he drags her out of the room. He drags her down the hall. He drags her down the stairs to the garage where, remember, his van is waiting. And it's once he gets into the garage that he realizes she is wearing the Apple Watch. Now, I don't know if he knows she made the call. I kind of don't think so. But remember, he smashed a bunch of different devices in the house. So I think he just realized that she had a device that, you know, could alert someone to her location. So he grabs a hammer and he smashes it while it's still on her wrist, like hits it with the hammer and hits her in the wrist with the hammer as well, before grabbing her and putting her in his van and taking off, headed for the woods. Now, we're in Washington. There are woods everywhere. He could have chosen many places, but for whatever reason, he chose that place that was like super close to the home, which, I mean, is a choice. But either way, she doesn't know where he's going. She's all duct taped. She's blindfolded. They're driving, and she, the whole time, is using her toes to try to, like, open the door so that she can get out. But she was unsuccessful. Anyways, this is where it gets just like, ugh. So, once Chae gets to the location that he's deemed the location where shit's gonna go down, he decides, I don't know if this is where he decides, this is where he begins to bury Young alive. He literally takes her out of the van, puts her on the ground, and then starts digging a hole with a shovel that he brought. And the whole time that she's laying on the ground, she can hear him digging her own grave. It reminds me of the Rachel Berkheimer case, only with like a happier ending, if you can call any of this happy, because at least Young actually survives. If you haven't seen that video, I'll try to remember to link it, but it's fucked up. Once he was done digging the hole, this is when Chae stabs Young in the chest. He stabs her several times in the chest and in her breasts with a long, thin knife before picking her up and placing her in the hole and then putting a large tree on top of her. And then he starts putting dirt on top of her. He starts burying her. He starts burying her alive. And this whole time, like, she can just hear the sounds of his feet shuffling and of the shovel hitting the ground and of, you know, the dirt. She can hear it and feel it being put on top of her, but she can't see anything because she still has this duct tape over her eyes, you know? And all she's able to tell is that the sun is still up. Like, that's the extent of what she can see. And that means that this was happening before 6:20 p.m. because I went on the Google machine and I looked it up, and sunset that day was 6:21 p.m. So she got taken at around 1, right? 1 p.m. Now she's here. It's taken all of these hours for him to like bury her because the sun is still up. Well, actually, no, it's before then. So scratch everything I just said. Me doing my research, but also still being wrong. Anyways, he's burying her alive. He put a tree on top of her. He's throwing dirt on her. And that's already like absolutely horrible, right? Well, while he's doing this, he's telling her, you're gonna die. So she's terrified. And the whole time he's shoveling dirt in on top of her, she's making a point to wiggle and like wiggle a lot to keep the dirt off of her face. And in doing so, she's also making it so the dirt doesn't get packed too tightly. But despite all of her efforts, she's still finding it really difficult to breathe. Now this poor woman lays in the ground in her shallow grave for hours. She says she can't tell exactly how long it's been, but at this point the sun has gone down, so it's definitely been some time. And it turns out that it was at about midnight that this happened. She starts wiggling. She starts wiggling in her grave, and she is able to wiggle herself out of the duct tape so that she can then, like her arms out of the duct tape, so that she can then dig herself out and push the tree off. And then she, you know, takes the duct tape off her legs and removes it from her eyes. And once she removes it from her eyes, she's going to try to escape, she realizes that Chae is still there. She looks over and she sees that his van is still parked there and the light is on in the van, and she can tell that the windows are all steamy. Can you even imagine how terrifying it would be to, like, first off, be in the situation, get yourself like dug out just to find that he's still there? I literally can't. So she looks and she believes that he's still, not that he's still asleep, that he is asleep based on how quiet he is being. So she musters like all the courage that she has in herself, and she takes the opportunity and she fucking runs. And she runs and she takes off into the woods, and she runs for like 30 minutes. She says that she saw headlights and that's how she was able to find a road. And she runs to the road, and after about 30 minutes of running, that's when she found herself at a home in a rural area on Stedman Road, I believe it is. And this was right before 1 a.m. And man, think about that for a second. 1 a.m. She was taken from her home at about 1 p.m. So this is 12 hours of actual hell. And it was just that for her. She said later, she told police that as she laid in the ground, she was just terrified and thinking about her kids and thinking about how bad she didn't want to die. And this is where we are finally back to where our story began, with Young stumbling upon this house, banging on the door, the residents being home, them going, finding her on their, front step, their porch, their stoop, whatever. I didn't see the house. And her begging them to call the cops. And they did just that. And I found online that there's actually surveillance footage of the moment where Young found this house, like running up and finding this house, like banging on the door. And I cannot even fathom how chilling that footage would be to watch. Oh my God. Anyways, the cops were caught. The cops were called, and when they arrived, they found Young in this, the front yard of this house, cowering behind a shed, like hiding behind a shed. She was so terrified, and she was said to have been covered in mud, like her clothes and her hair were covered in dirt. She still had tape wrapped around her neck and like the lower part of her face and her ankles, and she was covered in bruises that were described as extensive. And as soon as police got there and they saw her, they recognized her from all of the, alerts and the posters and all of that from the endangered missing persons alert that was put out later the day before. Young Anne was said to, quote, have trouble recalling an exact account of the events and specific directions of travel, end quote. But she did remember coming out of the woods and that this house was the first house that she had found. This poor woman was so scared, dude. So she had been cowering behind the shed, and once she realized that it was police and they were there to help her, she like sprinted over and she like grabbed the cop, the deputy, and was like grabbing him like super frantically, freaking out. And she was just like, my husband's trying to kill me. My husband's still out there in the woods somewhere. And the officer said that she seemed to be in extreme distress, which, duh. And that she seemed to be suffering from some sort of trauma, which again, duh. Young then told an officer that she was having trouble breathing because of the duct tape. So they like used some scissors that they had on them. I guess that like cops are given shears, which I didn't know. And they cut the tape off of her neck, and then they give her some water to drink while they wait for medics to get there to tend to her. Once the medics get there, they take her to the hospital so she can be treated. And fortunately, even though she had been stabbed in the chest several times, none of her injuries were life-threatening. So Young was interviewed several times. At least one of these interviews was done in the hospital. And though she was having trouble remembering like specifics of what happened, what she did remember was enough and like what they needed, which what she remembered was that her husband abducted her, duct taped her, took her to the woods, stabbed her, and put her in the hole. Like she remembered all of the specific details that one would need to arrest this asshole. Police then searched the whole area for Chae that night, but they didn't find him that night, which, I mean, it seems like it would probably be hard to do a search in the woods at night, but they tried and they did not find him that night. It wasn't until 7 hours later, the next morning, the 17th, at about, I think it was like 7:30 a.m., 8 a.m., something like that, that Chae was arrested. And this happened because there was a hiker going out, doing them a heckin' stroll, having a nice sunrise walk, when they noticed a suspicious van parked about 200 yards off in the woods from Stedman Road. So that's how close he was to the road where Young ended up finding the house. Now, I didn't see it reported if this person was looking specifically for Chae's van and knew that's what they were calling in, or if it was it's just weird to see a van out in the woods like that, like something is going on. But either way, they called in the suspicious vehicle and police went to check it out. So police get there, they realize that it's Chae, and he is arrested without incident. And this is another thing, like, this guy's so dumb to me for so many reasons, but like, why would you do this near a hiking trail in Washington? I'm glad that you're dumb, right? Like, obviously, because I want Young to live. I'm glad that she did. Duh. But like, how dumb are you? Like, Washington's beautiful. People do be hiking, and you're gonna do this next to a hiking trail? Like, I don't know. It's just stupid. He's just stupid. Men who murder women are stupid. People who murder other people? Stupid. Anyways, Chae, I guess, was taken to an area hospital to be treated or observed or whatever. I couldn't find out exactly what was wrong with him. I just saw that he was taken to the hospital and he was kept there until Tuesday, and that's when he was transferred to a county jail. So he must have had something wrong with him, because this all happened, like, he got arrested on what? Monday? Oh, I guess it's not that long, but still. Kind of a while, so something was going on. But either way, he goes to jail. Anyways, the day after his arrest, investigators headed over to the area where Chae had taken Young, and it was a clearing in the woods west of Rainier Road and south of Stedman Road, south of Lacey. On the edge of the clearing was a mound of trees, and under these trees was a, quote, hole consistent with a grave type design, end quote. Anyways, it appeared that the grave, like, hole, they found her grave. They found the hole that he dug for her grave, and it was consistent with being freshly dug, so obviously this was the location. Inside the grave, they found duct tape, and it was duct tape that was consistent with both the duct tape that was found in the home and the duct tape that was found on Young when she was recovered. And inside, they also found woman's hair, like women's hair, which was consistent with Young. And in addition to that, one of the pieces of tape that they found actually had, like, the imprint of and a piece of Young's Apple Watch on it. So it was all like, all of the puzzle pieces were coming together perfectly here. Detectives who found the grave that Chae had dug for his wife, the mother of his children, said that it was 65 inches long, 30 inches wide, and only 19 inches deep. So I don't know exactly what sort of success he was planning to have with a 19-inch deep grave. Those are usually 6 feet, right? 6 feet under the show. Yeah, 6 feet. 19 inches. It's like a foot. It's like a foot and a half. A little over a foot and a half. But yeah. Anyways, Chae is arrested, right? And he's facing a multitude of charges. The declaration of the prosecutors supporting probable cause stated that they'd like to charge him with, quote, attempted murder in the first degree / domestic violence, kidnapping in the first degree / domestic violence, assault in the first degree / domestic violence, and felony harassment with the threat to kill / domestic violence. Now, more charges may be added. A statement was released that said, like, basically this event was incredibly traumatic for Young, which, duh, and that they're getting information from her piece by piece whenever she, you know, has the memory of it, the strength to remember it. As new pieces of information come to her and are given to police, new charges can, and subsequently, is subsequently like the right word right there? They will be added once and if new charges are... I thought that when this baby came out of me, I'd be smarter. Basically, if they learn that he did more stuff, more charges will be added, is like the whole point of what I'm trying to say here. Help me here. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Now, Chae's attorney, which is a public defender, asked the judge for his bail to be set at $150,000, saying that, like, listen, I know that it's only $150,000, but, like, he doesn't have any money, so that'll keep him in jail anyway. The attorney noted that Chae has no criminal record, no history of failing to appear in court. He also suggested that because Chae was a veteran with more than 30 years of experience, he might have some, quote, service-related mental health conditions that will end up being addressed probably later on. But his military background, which was being used as, like, a way to, I think they're going to try to do, like, a mental health thing, but his military background is also part of what made him so terrifying to Young, because Young said that Chae worked in intelligence and that he was super well-traveled, very, very, very smart. The prosecution was like, oh, okay, so $150,000 is, like, a lot and he won't be able to come up with that. Well, that's great. How about instead we hold him without any bail because if we let him out, he could be violent to somebody or try to interfere with the case. And the prosecutor said specifically, and I quote, "The declaration of probable cause laid out a really horrific situation in which the defendant dug a grave, placed his estranged wife in that grave, and told her he was going to kill her after he had finally attacked her and kidnapped her from her home." During his bail hearing, a statement was also made by young Anne. Like, she wrote it. She didn't read it herself. She wasn't there. I don't think. I'm 99% sure that she did not appear at his bail hearing. But her statement was read by, I believe it was a victim's advocate. And her statement said, and I quote, "Please, no bail. I am really afraid for my life. I just want to emphasize that I fear him so much, and he will kill me if he is out." The judge decided to go with the prosecution's request, luckily, and they didn't give him any bail. He was held without bail. And Chae was also instructed that he's not allowed to speak to Young. He can't, like, call her, write her, communicate with her in any way. And he was also prohibited to speaking to some witnesses, which I don't know who those witnesses could be. I'm going to assume it's probably his kids, but it wasn't expressly stated. So that's just speculation on my part. But who else would be a witness, you know? I don't know. Now, why did this happen? That's really the question. I mean, these things are generally a little complex, right? Men who kill their spouses tend to come up with some, like, really creative excuses for why they do the things that they do. But Young was able to give some insight into a motive. She said that Chae had threatened to kill her many times in the past, but she had never taken him seriously. She didn't think he would really try. She didn't expect him to do what he did here. But she did say that on this particular occasion that he told her that he would rather have her die than for her to take his retirement money. So it seems like he might have tried to kill her over money, which is just like when I think of the dumbest, like, there's no good reason to kill somebody, right? But money is such a stupid reason to me. Like, I understand that people are very money motivated, and I guess it's just because I, as a person, am not. Like, I'm cool with being, like, I don't want to be, like, homeless, obviously, but, like, I'd be fine with not, like, I don't want to be rich. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about being rich. I would just like to be fed and clothed and have a roof. You know what I mean? But people, man, people just do be killing people over money, and I'm always like, we're all gonna die. Like, what? Like, you can't take it with you, bro. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. It's just not in my wheelhouse of thought, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's the thought here, is that he was trying to kill her. I'm sure there was probably more to it. Like, he's probably also super pissed off. And since he's an abuser, he's probably a bit possessive. These are all just my thoughts. But yeah, I'd rather you die than take my retirement money. And anyways, that right now is where the case stands. Chae is in jail, and he's going to be arraigned on his charges on November 1st, which I think at the time that I'm uploading this, that just passed, because I'm thinking, I don't know for sure if it's going to happen. If it does, you can comment and let me know that I did it, but I think this video is going to be uploaded as a bonus video on my birthday, which is November 4th, which is a Friday and isn't my normal upload day. It just kind of depends on if I can get it filmed, edited, all that in time. But if I do, go ahead and tell me happy birthday, I guess, if you want to. But that just means that I don't have what happened at the arraignment in this video. If anything new happens, I will put it in a pinned comment. Like, if anything happens, because, you know, it's a new case, it's a developing case. So I will put a pinned comment of anything that has come out in the time from between when I film this and when I upload this, right? But the chief of police did come out with a statement saying that, based on what he's seen in his experience, this is a very strong case against Chae. Which, I mean, yeah, it seems pretty strong to me too. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, like, how's Young doing? She hasn't been interviewed. I haven't seen any interviews from her, but the chief of police said that, you know, she was taken to the hospital and she was treated, that even though she was stabbed multiple times and hit in the head and buried, like, it was non-life threatening, and that she has since, you know, her whole ordeal that she survived from, she has since gotten therapy and psychological help, things like that, from a lot of different agencies through the court. So she is getting some sort of help, because she's going to need it, man. That sounds like, I can't even imagine how traumatizing that is. I can't imagine, like, trying to live through that and feel safe with anyone after going through something like this. But I'm glad she's getting help, and I'm just so happy that she lived. Like, I can't even imagine being as strong as she was. I don't think I'd be so strong. I always say that, but it's just because I really don't think I would be as strong as some of these people are, man. Now, one thing I want to leave you with before this video is over is some statements that were made from this woman who is a former FBI agent named Jennifer Coffindaffer, which is quite the name. And I guess that she's a retired FBI agent, and that now she's like an expert witness that you can hire to come to trials, you know, and look at your case, blah, 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 blah. I wouldn't even normally include like a quote like this because it's not like she worked on the case or anything, but I found that what she said, her insight into this case and of Young's resilience and will to live, was a useful thing and something that I think could be good for people to hear in case you ever find yourself in a situation that seems, you know, as hopeless as a situation that Young found herself in. And Jennifer said, and I quote, "I think the biggest takeaway from this case is the fact that this woman survived. If there's any message that can be brought home on this, it's the fact that you can be stabbed, strangled, buried alive, suffocated, and survive for several hours." She basically said that the main takeaway from this case is like Young's will to live. She basically said in another quote that if you find yourself in a life-threatening situation and you don't panic and you keep your wits about you, you can, in theory, save your own life. Now that I've given you all the information, right, everything we have out there so far, all the details on this case, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that is this. How the fuck does somebody do to another person the things that Chae did to his wife, the mother of his children? He's what, gonna just leave his kids with no mom over money? That's such bullshit. And better yet, a better question is, what do you think? How do you think that Young had it in her to be brave enough to survive? Those are the questions I want answers to. I don't think they have answers, but let me know what you think in the comments below. But anyways, guys, with that said, that is the survival story of Young on. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the details you would want when looking into this case. And of course, thank you for remembering Young with me today. Please let me know in the comments down below what case you would like to see me cover in the future. As you know, I have a long list of cases, but if you leave me a suggestion, I try to look into it. I add your case to the list. I put your name next to it so I can give you a shout out because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Well, so that's why I like to look into the cases you suggest. And this case is a perfect example of that because it was suggested to me by, hey, it's me, right? My homie on Twitter, and this is a local case, and I actually like really enjoy covering cases that are local to you guys because they're cases that I might not have heard of. You know, a lot of cases, and this is off the subject, but a lot of like local cases, smaller cases that are in like littler areas that don't get the national coverage, it's harder for people who aren't in that area to hear about them. So when you tell me about your local cases, I can hopefully spread them to people outside of your local area, since we have people in the Brat Pack from all over the world, man. It's absolutely wild. There's people in like South Africa who are watching me. I don't understand. I will never understand. Of course, if you haven't already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you're ever curious what makeup I used, it'll all be listed in the description box below, along with like the nail polish, earrings, things like that, as well as a link to my merch store, a link to my membership where you can get early access to non-sponsored videos. And also, you know what, leave me in the comments. Okay, so I wasn't even gonna say anything, but like, if you've been here before, you may notice the tiny elephant in the room, which is my new itty bitty baby bangs. And I know this isn't for everybody. I know baby bangs aren't for everybody, but I want your opinions down below, but be nice. And just so you know, going into it, I fucking love them. So I hope you do too. Don't roast me too bad. I look like Will from Stranger Things, don't I? Like the haircut that they kept him with. But anyways, that's it. That's all I have to say. I just want to now thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.